basically not funding the Williamson Act subvention. Are there provisions in our contract, because these contracts, you know, the state funds it, but the actual contract is between the county and the landowner. So if the state stops the subvention of it, and it basically makes the whole Williamson Act crumble, because the contract's between the county and the landowner, how is the county covered on that? I don't want to end up getting in a lawsuit for breach of contract when the state pulls out.
Well, the contract is specific to the Williamson Act, and it mentions it right in the introductory comments. So if that program goes by the wayside, I would imagine that so would the funding and the tax break that they would otherwise receive.
Well, I want more than an imagine. Is that a commitment? I mean, are we covered on that, Janine?
That issue actually is an issue that's being discussed among a lot of counties at the present.
Yeah.
And the consensus is that, just what Frank said, is that if the funding goes away, then you know the contracts, you know, could be terminated. But that's still a legal issue that I think everybody's weighing in on at the present time. And you know, as soon as we have a real definitive answer on that, I'll let you know. But that is up for discussion.
Well, so any contracts that we would sign from this day forward, shouldn't we have a disclaimer in there that says if the state subvention stops, then this contract's null and void? That, to me, that would be a way to shore up our position for and we can't go back and do that. But for contracts we sign from this day forward, couldn't we put a disclaimer in there just saying that if the state ceases funding of the Williamson Act, then this contract is null and void?
Yes, although there are differing viewpoints on that provision, on that issue as well, and there are some counties that are taking the position that is meaningless, and others are now starting to add it into their agreements.
Would you advise us to put that disclaimer in?
We've been talking about, we're looking at a variety of issues with respect to the Williamson Act and also the ordinance itself. So that is something that we're discussing with staff now. Yes.
So we will have some sort of a disclaimer on future contracts?
Yeah, I would certainly recommend that, given the nature of what's going on in Sacramento.
Well, I guess this is a good place to start. So if we're going to sign this shouldn't we start here on this?
No, it's the act of government to put it off for a couple months. I'm sorry.
Well, I'd like to
call
get a
myself
commitment
out
here
of
which
order.
way we're going here.
I thought we had agreed that was going forward from this point forward, but I'll defer to staff on that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see any problem with putting something like that in the contract specific.
Mr. Chairman, could you make that a board directive if that happens?
To the clerk.
Our office is also involved with managing the contracts, and we do not have language in there yet. It has been under consideration, and Dave Bankston, your Ag Commissioner, has proposed language that's under review. So it has not been incorporated as of yet, but as Janine said, it is an active discussion. So whether or not that could be incorporated into the template for this one.
I don't know reason why it couldn't.
Right.
Okay.
Can we have somebody make a commitment here?
Mr. Pinch, as you asked, and I shall fulfill, and I'll make it an order of the chair that we add that provision in each additional ag preserve
Thank you,
approval from this point forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With that, I would like to make the motion to approve the option one.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Discussion to the motion. Hearing and seeing none, to the clerk.
That's the alternative one at the bottom of the staff memo.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's correct. Any additional concerns from the board?
Just for the record, for the public, when pressed, government will act.
Okay, call for the vote. All those in favor of the action signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Okay, moving on to the next timed item. This is item 7C4, notice public hearing at 1:30, discussion possible action of a proposed major subdivision number S1-2007, a rezone. I won't go through the whole situation. Located at 13,100 South Highway 101 in Hopland. This item was continued from November 18th. This is a public hearing. For the record, I have to go through all this items again. To the clerk, has proper notice been established?
Yes, it has.
and the public hearing is now opened. First, we'll have a staff presentation, and then we'll, at the end of that, we'll take public comment. At the end of public comment, we'll take staff final remarks. The board would then present questions to the staff for public comments. I would then close the public hearing and remand the order back to the board for action. So at this point, the public hearing is open, and to staff for presentation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a case that involves several different kinds of applications, and it's the case has actually been around for a while. The first application for this on this property was in about 2000, and at that time it involved some neighboring property to the south. And again, at that time, they're proposing to rezone about 20 acres from a 1 acre minimum to rural community, another 20 acres to general commercial, another 1.75 acres to multifamily, and then 54 acres to the RR1 PD. At that time, for the portion of land that encompasses this property, there were 41 parcels being proposed, and at that time, Planning and Building Services had recommended that an EIR be prepared, and ultimately the project went away. And when it came back in a 2004 application, and at that time the applicant was proposing 29 parcels. Again, going through the review process, we concluded that an EIR was warranted for a variety of reasons, and those are stated on page PC2 of your staff report. And at that time, the application was withdrawn, and now we have the current application, which includes a subdivision, a rezone, and a use permit and variance. The project would include, and at this time, 18 parcels to be created, 17 plus the remainder, and that number's pretty well based on the number of service connections that are available to this project from the public utility district serving the Hopland area. The project would include the subdivision, a rezoning to a planned development to allow for some variation in parcel sizes to attempt to fit the property. There's also a use permit for the, if you will, the implementation of that rezone, that planned development. And there's also a variance to setbacks in that there will be some, I believe, 6 retaining walls that will be built right along the front yards of some of the individual parcels along the roadways that provide access to the various lots to be created. The road will be taking off from Caltrans State Highway 101 at the northwest end of Hopland. Over the course of time, when the applicant had come in for these various iterations of the application, there were a number of studies that had been generated by the applicant, and they included a traffic study, a Hopland Springs design approach to the natural treatment of stormwater runoff. There was a hydrologic and hydrological calculations. There was a geotechnical engineering report, and there was botanical and wildlife reports that have been submitted. With that, we have gone through an initial study and have prepared a negative declaration should the project be approved. We know that the project is an area that has some pretty highly erosive soils in the area, and that it becomes of concern because of the grading that will be going on and the cuts and fills that will be taking place. As I said, there'll be 6 retaining